Shoji's backstory is revealed, Spinner unleashes new quirks, and Koda unlocks his quirk awakening? Let's talk about all of this and more as we dive right into the newest chapter of My Hero Academia. So My Hero Academia Chapter 371 is finally out, and with it we get to see the continuation of the battle of the heteromorphs, Shoji and Koda versus Spinner and his army. Plus we also get a little more than just a look behind Shoji's mask, as it goes all the way into his backstory. But before I begin, don't forget to try to smash that like button and slide it into that subscribe button's DMs to hit that notification bell. And now, without further ado, let's jump right into My Hero Academia Chapter 371, titled Together with Shoji. This chapter opens up exactly where the last chapter left off, with Meizo Shoji, whose face has been officially unveiled to the world, calling out to the heteromorph army and Spinner, asking if they have even considered the safety of all of the innocent doctors and patients inside the hospital before making their grand assault. Spinner, still trying to retain his conscience and individuality, is genuinely confused by this question, almost in a dazed-like state, wondering in broken thoughts what Shoji is talking about and why Shoji hit him earlier. Before Spinner can respond, the heteromorph army begins to rally behind Spinner, exclaiming their side is the true side of justice, and Spinner is going to explain why they are right and why they should continue to fight for Kurogiri. However, after all these claims, Spinner, trying his best to formulate even a single thought, essentially goes brain dead, standing still with his drooling mouth agape as he calls out to his troops two very simple words: don't care. This statement initially causes a few of the heteromorphs to become confused themselves, but luckily for the villains, the Mantis Preacher covers for Spinner, exclaiming that what their leader means is that history is written in blood, and excess bloodshed is unavoidable, so trying to save the people inside the hospital won't do anything for their cause, rallying the troops once more. Despite this new rally though, Shoji still tries to reason with Spinner, telling the mind-crushed villain that all this attack will do is set, and I quote, us back 30 years. Although Spinner merely responds to this plea by telling Shoji to shut up, as his body begins to morph and change. The story then briefly cuts to a flashback of Spinner receiving his new quirks from All For One, where it's revealed that Spinner didn't ask for any specific power. He was just willing to accept anything he could use to help Shigaraki's cause. And in fact, it was All For One who was adamant on giving Spinner multiple quirks, stating that alongside a body bulk quirk, he should get the quirk Scale Mail, which according to All For One will not only increase his defense, but will give him the look of a true leader. It's also interesting to note that amongst this flashback, there is also one of Shigaraki where he and Spinner are bonding about playing League of Legends, which is not only pretty funny because, you know, the villains being League fans, but it also reinforces the point that Spinner, while not desiring all this new power, accepted it to help his friend Shigaraki. And following this, we see Spinner fully activate the Scale Mail quirk, as we see this monstrous image of a fully scaled up Spinner leaping through the air, mauling Shoji with his sword, as he shouts out to his troops, just keep moving. Koda, seeing Shoji's arms being ripped apart, calls out to his friend, as the Mantis Preacher joyfully proclaims to the heteromorphs to follow their leader in fighting back against their oppressors, which annoys Koda, who thinks about how ironic this statement is, as out of everyone, Shoji is most certainly not an oppressor. And it's here where the story cuts to another flashback, this time to the UA dorms, where we see Shoji reveal his origins and face to Class 1A. As it turns out, Shoji, unlike the other heteromorphs in his class, is from a backwater village, where being pure is valued above all else. Those in his village who were not born pure or normal were often beaten and tortured by the villagers even at a young age. And it's because of these beatings that Shoji's neck and face are covered in numerous scars. Dear lord, this got kinda dark. Shoji then continues explaining that the real reason he wears a mask is because he's afraid that if people saw his scars, they would just assume he's just some heteromorph looking for some sort of revenge for what society has done to him, and not as a hero who fights for justice. Tokoyami, a fellow heteromorph, commends Shoji for his bravery, saying that standing above his trauma and still doing the right thing just shows Shoji's true strength. And Shoji explains that while the painful memories of his home life will never leave him, instead of dwelling on them, he chooses to embrace the one memory of his childhood where he was overjoyed to have this body of his. As we see a flashback to a very young Shoji using his dupli-arms to reach out and save a drowning young girl caught in river rapids. It's honestly quite adorable and a pretty devastating scene, knowing that this is Shoji's only fond memory of his childhood. Man, Shoji's backstory is so sad, and the dude is mature as fuck. And Class 1A seem to agree, as after hearing this origin story, they become overwhelmed with emotion, dive under his arms on top of him, and cry out that they won't just let him have one happy memory anymore. They will make a ton of happy memories together. It's also nice to note that Mineta apologizes to Shoji too for calling him an octopus way back when, and Shoji says it's honestly no big deal. His hero name is Tentacle after all. With his friends now snuggling him, one of which I have to point out is Koda, a fellow heteromorph who is sobbing at Shoji's story, Shoji begins to smile, and he lets his friends know that although he knows that over a century worth of prejudice won't be over in their lifetime, he will continue to fight for his kind and carry the torch from those who came before him, so that someday he can become the world's coolest hero and be able to pass on good memories to the next generation. Man, this side quest got so damn interesting all of a sudden. And following this flashback, the story then cuts back to the present, where we see Shoji and Spinner still locked in combat in the air. Shoji, now more determined than ever, shouts at Spinner that he too has suffered discrimination and that oppression will never be right. But there must be another way to find justice than this. Unfortunately, this doesn't get through to Spinner at all, who continues his charge, climbing across a building screaming, "Don't care, destroy all." Shoji, then wrapping his arms around one another, charges at Spinner, shouting back at him to use his rage for good. Because while everyone might look different, the one thing all people have in common is that they all have scars. Overhearing this argument of beliefs, the heteromorph army begins to slow down, as they turn to see Spinner and Shoji going toe-to-toe in the sky. The Mantis Preacher, in an attempt to keep the group rowdy, cries out once more, this time mocking Shoji, claiming his beliefs to be childish and naive, laughing at him for being so foolish. But this turns out to be the Preacher's biggest mistake, however, as in the middle of his mockery, a massive swarm of birds rise up behind him and surround him, as we see none other than Koda, whose head seems to have grown out in his rage, cry out, "Don't you dare mock Shoji." Looks like Koda's going Super Saiyan. And with this, chapter 371 comes to an end, as Spinner, in seeing Shoji wrap all his dupli-arms around one another, making a massive arm of eyes and limbs, tells the young hero that he is gross, to which Shoji, now ready for action more than ever, replies, "Yes, this is who I am." Overall, this was actually quite an interesting chapter. I was a little taken aback by the shift in the story last week, but to be honest, now I'm all in. We got the heteromorph boys on the case. Shoji's backstory was honestly quite a bit darker than I was expecting, and has a very strong subtext behind it all, and it most certainly has made me admire Shoji's character a hell of a lot more. If there's one thing Horikoshi knows how to do, it's how to quickly make us feel for a character in a short amount of time. Spinner's new scaly form has made him look more monstrous than ever, and I think for the first time in the entire series, he seems like an actual threat. And not just to Shoji, he could probably take on a few members of Class 1A with this power. Koda's quirk and head awakening was another big surprise I wasn't expecting at all, and it kinda looks like he's sending out telekinetic waves from his head. Could it be he can now communicate with animals through his mind? That would be pretty awesome. But But let me know what you think of this chapter. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like and comment what you think is going to happen next. For more My Hero content, subscribe to the Lunchtime crew. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Plus Ultra.